In the darkened corners of the United States, whispers of an impending crisis swirled among the populace like a chilling wind. The government had announced a revolutionary vaccine, touted as the key to eradicating a deadly virus that had already claimed countless lives. But for some, the optimism was tinged with suspicion. What were the true intentions behind this hastily developed serum? As the rollout began, a series of unsettling events unfolded, sending a shockwave of fear rippling through the nation. Amidst the chaos, 35-year-old Sarah Mitchell was just trying to navigate her daily life. A single mother of two in a small town in Ohio, she had always been skeptical of government initiatives. When the announcement for the vaccine came, she was bombarded by mixed messages from friends, family, and news outlets. She spent nights awake, scouring the internet for information, trying to discern what was truth and what was fear-mongering. One evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the glow of her laptop illuminating the concerned lines on her face. Her two children, 8-year-old Ethan and 6-year-old Lily, were already asleep. The town was eerily quiet, an unsettling silence settling over the streets as the clock ticked closer to midnight. A notification pinged on her screen, a live stream from an underground journalist named Marcus. He had gained a small following by exposing government secrets and shining light on corruption. His latest video, titled "The Truth Behind the Vaccine," immediately drew her attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus said, his face a mask of intensity, "what the government is calling a vaccine is nothing more than a mass experiment. They're using the public as test subjects. We're not just fighting a virus, we're being subjected to something far more sinister." Sarah leaned in closer, her heart pounding. Marcus continued to expose troubling details. Anonymous sources claimed that the vaccine was laced with a compound that could manipulate human behavior. The government's goal: total control. "The vaccine is just the first step," Marcus said, his voice growing more urgent. "Those who receive it will become unwitting pawns in a grand scheme. Their actions will be monitored, their thoughts influenced. You need to stay away from it." As the video ended, a chill crept up Sarah's spine. She felt a mixture of anger and fear. How could she protect her children from this? But the very next day, the vaccine was being administered in the local school gymnasium, an announcement that sent shockwaves through the community. "Mom, are we going to get the vaccine?" Ethan asked, eyes wide with innocence when she picked him up from school. I don't know, buddy," Sarah stammered, her mind racing. She had never felt more vulnerable, knowing she had to make a decision that could change their lives forever. That night, she lay awake, grappling with the looming decision. The shadows danced in her room as her thoughts spiraled. Images of her children's future flashed before her, mingling with the fear of a government conspiracy. The next morning, the town buzzed with excitement. As people lined up at the gym, Sarah felt a knot tightening in her stomach. She stood outside, watching as families entered, parents leading their children to what could only be described as a clinic for a hidden agenda. The white tents and smiling nurses did nothing to ease her unease. Ethan, oblivious to his mother's internal struggle, tugged on her sleeve. "Can we go in now? I want to be brave like everyone else." His excitement was infectious, but Sarah couldn't shake the dread that clawed at her gut. "Okay," she finally said, a false smile plastered on her face. They joined the line, her heart racing with each step. As they approached the front, Sarah noticed the nurses were unusually cheerful, their smiles almost too wide, their eyes devoid of warmth. "Welcome. You're going to feel so much better after this," one of the nurses chirped as she gestured them inside. As they entered the makeshift clinic, a sense of foreboding washed over Sarah. A whiteboard with the words "Project Lifeline" was hastily scrawled on the wall. A hushed conversation buzzed among the nurses as they prepared the vaccine vials, their voices low and conspiratorial. Next, the nurse called, snapping Sarah back to the present. Ethan stepped forward, full of bravado. "I'm ready," he declared, puffing out his chest. Sarah's heart ached as she watched her son roll up his sleeve. As the nurse injected the vaccine, Sarah's stomach twisted violently. The syringe seemed to gleam under the fluorescent lights, and for a moment, she thought she saw a flicker of something dark in the nurse's eyes. "Your turn," another nurse called, her voice syrupy sweet. Before Sarah could protest, a hand gripped her arm, pulling her forward. The moment the needle pierced her skin, a shiver of unease snaked down her spine. She stumbled back, her vision blurring momentarily. As they exited the gym, a loud crash echoed from inside. The sounds of chaos erupted. A woman screamed, followed by frantic shouts from the nurses. "Run!" someone yelled, and panic erupted in the line outside. "Mom," Ethan shouted, clinging to her hand. They sprinted to their car, heartbeats echoing in their ears. The air was thick with fear, and as Sarah drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The gym was in disarray, people spilling out of the doors, their faces twisted in terror. That night, as darkness fell over the town, Sarah felt a heaviness settle in her bones. She brushed her teeth with trembling hands, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back looked different, as if a shadow had been cast over her spirit. "Mommy, I don't feel good," Lily murmured, sleepily stumbling into the bathroom. Sarah knelt beside her daughter, brushing her hair away from her forehead. "What's wrong, sweetie?" "My head hurts," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Panic surged through Sarah. She had no idea what side effects to expect. "Let's get you some water, okay?" As she helped Lily back to bed, a sudden wave of nausea hit her. She stumbled into the hallway, gripping the wall for support. The house spun around her as shadows flickered at the edges of her vision. In the darkness, a low, droning hum began to fill the air, a sound that seemed to vibrate in her bones. Sarah clutched her head, struggling to comprehend what was happening. Then she heard it, a whisper barely audible but chilling. "You're one of us now." The words echoed in her mind, sending icy fingers of dread coursing through her veins. She shook her head, trying to dispel the growing darkness, but it was too late. The next morning, Sarah awoke to an overwhelming sense of unease. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, but it felt harsh, invasive. As she tried to push away the remnants of sleep, she noticed a strange heaviness in her limbs. With a deep breath, she swung her legs over the side of the bed, ready to confront whatever awaited her. Ethan was already awake, his gaze fixed on the television. "Mom, look," he exclaimed, pointing at the screen. The news anchor's face was pale, the ticker scrolling beneath him filled with alarming headlines. "Mysterious illnesses plague local community following vaccine rollout." As Sarah approached, she could hear snippets of terrified testimonies. "I felt fine until yesterday, but now I can't stop shaking. My son is screaming in his sleep." The panic was palpable, and a knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. "Mommy, I feel weird," Lily mumbled, emerging from her room with dazed eyes. Sarah's heart sank. "What do you mean, honey? I can't remember what happened last night," Lily stammered, her tiny hands fidgeting. "No more TV for now, okay? Let's get some breakfast." As they moved to the kitchen, Sarah felt a strange sensation washing over her, a sense of detachment from reality. The walls seemed to pulse, and the sounds of the world outside felt muffled, distant. With each passing hour, the unease in her household grew. The children were restless, their usual laughter replaced by anxious whispers. As Sarah prepared lunch, she caught snippets of conversations echoing from their rooms, words she couldn't understand, almost like they were speaking a different language. "Mommy," Ethan called suddenly, his voice frantic. "Come here." Rushing to his room, Sarah found her son staring wide-eyed at the wall. "What's wrong?" "I saw something," he shouted, pointing. Sarah followed his gaze, but all she saw were shadows shifting across the wall, no evidence of anything amiss. "Ethan, it's just a light playing tricks. There's nothing there." But Ethan shook his head vigorously. "No, I swear, it was big and dark." The weight of her son's fear settled heavily on her chest. "Okay, let's sit together and watch a movie, okay? Just for a little bit." As they settled on the couch, the sense of unease didn't dissipate. Instead, it deepened. Each creak of the house sounded like a warning, and the shadows loomed larger than life. A few hours later, Sarah received a message from a friend, Lisa, who had also received the vaccine. "Something is wrong. I can feel it. Meet me at the diner." She quickly texted back, agreeing to meet. The thought of leaving the children alone gnawed at her, but she knew she needed answers. "Ethan, I'm stepping out for a little while. Can you take care of your sister?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Okay, Mom," he replied, though his eyes were still filled with concern. The diner was only a few blocks away, but as Sarah walked through the empty streets, the oppressive silence weighed heavily on her. Shadows loomed in the corners of her vision, whispering secrets she couldn't decipher. Upon entering the diner, Sarah spotted Lisa sitting in a booth, her face pale and drawn. "Hey, you made it," Lisa said weakly, gesturing for Sarah to sit down. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice low. "Are you okay?" "I don't know. I feel different. Ever since I got the vaccine, it's like I'm not myself. It's hard to explain." "What do you mean?" Sarah pressed, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. "I can't focus. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a dream, like everything around me is just not real, and I'm hearing things, voices, whispers," Lisa confessed, her eyes darting nervously. Sarah's breath hitched. "I've been feeling that too. The kids, I'm worried about them." Lisa leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard a rumor that the vaccine isn't just for the virus. They're using it for something else, something more sinister." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, leaning closer, her heart racing. "They're testing something on us, a mind control experiment. People are acting weird, and the government is covering it up. I've seen people behaving strangely, almost like they're being puppeteered." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Have you told anyone else?" "Who would believe us?" Lisa replied, her voice trembling. "I think they're watching us. The nurses, they seemed almost too happy, like they knew something we didn't." Just then, a loud crash echoed from the back of the diner, causing both women to jump. A group of people, their faces ashen, burst through the door, eyes wild with terror. They're coming for us," one man screamed, his clothes torn and filthy. "What are you talking about?" the waitress asked, panic creeping into her voice. "They're experimenting on us. The government. We have to get out of here." Chaos erupted as people scrambled for the exits, fear gripping the diner like a vice. Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline as she grabbed Lisa's hand, pulling her toward the door. "We need to leave," Sarah shouted, her heart pounding. Outside, the streets were a frenzy of panic. People ran in every direction, their faces twisted in horror. In the distance, sirens blared, echoing the terror that engulfed the town. "Sarah," Lisa shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "What do we do?" "We need to find the kids," Sarah replied, her stomach churning at the thought of leaving them behind. But as they rushed back toward their neighborhood, a horrifying sight met their eyes. Dark figures loomed at the edges of the street, their movements jerky and unnatural. Sarah felt her blood run cold as she recognized the faces of those who had been vaccinated. They were no longer the same people she once knew. Their eyes were vacant, and their movements were mechanical, as if they were marionettes controlled by unseen strings. "Run!" Sarah screamed, pulling Lisa along as they sprinted through the chaos. The screams of the townspeople echoed in her ears, mingling with the whispers that had haunted her thoughts since the vaccine. "You're one of us now." The two women dashed toward Sarah's house, hearts pounding in their chests. But as they approached, they were met with an even more chilling sight. A group of people, friends, neighbors, family, were gathered in the front yard, their faces twisted into eerie, synchronized smiles. "Join us," they chanted in unison, their voices a haunting melody that echoed in the evening air. "What the hell is happening?" Lisa gasped, her eyes wide with fear. As the group turned toward them, Sarah's heart dropped. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and a chilling realization washed over her. They had become agents of the experiment, unwitting soldiers in the government's twisted game. "Mommy," a small voice cried out, breaking through the chaos. Sarah's heart raced as she spotted Ethan and Lily standing at the edge of the yard, their faces pale and frightened. "Get away from them," she shouted, pushing through the throng of smiling townsfolk. "Sarah," Lisa cried, but it was too late. The figures surged forward, arms outstretched, and as they closed in, a wave of panic consumed her. In that moment, Sarah realized the horrifying truth. They were no longer just victims of a vaccine. They were being drawn into something far darker, something that sought to erase their very identities. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah pushed through the crowd, reaching for her children. "Ethan, Lily, come to me." But the moment her hand grasped Ethan's, she felt it, an overwhelming wave of energy coursing through her, filling her with dread and confusion. The whispers grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. "You're one of us now." And in that instant, she knew she had become part of the experiment, a pawn in the government's twisted game. The world around Sarah blurred as the whispers enveloped her, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. She felt her grip on reality slip away, and the sensation of her children's hands grew faint. Panic surged within her as she struggled to resist the pull of the collective. "Mommy," Lily's voice broke through the fog, piercing the veil of darkness that threatened to consume her. "No, stay with me," Sarah screamed, desperately trying to fight against the growing numbness. But the voices were relentless, drowning out her pleas. "You are one of us now. Join us. Submit." The figures surrounding her swayed, their faces twisted in eerie smiles, eyes glinting with a terrifying intensity. Sarah felt their presence pressing in on her, and the urge to succumb grew stronger. She fought against it with every ounce of her being, trying to maintain her individuality, her sense of self. "Ethan, Lily," she shouted, pulling them closer, clenching their small hands tightly. "We need to get out of here." But as she turned, she noticed that the neighborhood had transformed. The familiar homes were now grotesque caricatures of themselves, distorted and twisted. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air was thick with an oppressive darkness. With a surge of determination, Sarah led her children away from the nightmarish scene. They sprinted down the street, heartbeats echoing in their ears, but the whispers lingered, promising comfort and submission. "Mommy, I don't want to be one of them," Ethan cried, fear etched on his small face. "Neither do I. We have to fight it," Sarah replied, trying to mask her own rising panic. As they ran, she glanced back at the crowd, and what she saw chilled her to the core. The townspeople, now fully consumed by the experiment, were marching in unison, their eyes glazed over, their smiles hauntingly wide. They moved with a purpose, an eerie synchronization that sent shivers down her spine. "Where do we go?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Just keep running," Sarah urged, her mind racing for a plan. They needed to find a safe place, a refuge from the madness that had enveloped their town. Suddenly, a loud explosion reverberated in the distance, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The sky darkened, clouds swirling ominously above them, casting an unsettling shadow over the landscape. "Over there," Sarah pointed toward a small park, a haven of trees and open space. "We can hide there." They raced toward the park, and as they reached the edge, Sarah felt a momentary sense of relief. The park was empty, a stark contrast to the chaos that had engulfed their neighborhood. "Stay close to me," Sarah instructed, scanning the area for any sign of danger. As they ducked behind a large oak tree, she could still hear the whispers, a distant echo in her mind. "You're one of us now." The words clawed at her thoughts, wrapping around her like a noose. "Mommy, I'm scared," Lily whimpered, pressing against her. "I know, baby, I'm scared too," Sarah admitted, her heart heavy, "but we're going to get through this." Suddenly, a chilling sound broke the air, a low, mechanical hum that seemed to resonate from the ground itself. Sarah's heart raced as she looked around, searching for the source. In the distance, a dark van emerged from the shadows, its windows tinted black. "Mom, we have to go," Ethan shouted, his voice filled with panic. Before she could respond, the van skidded to a stop, and figures emerged, their faces obscured by dark masks. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized them as agents of the government, their presence a harbinger of the nightmare that had begun. "Run," she shouted, grabbing her children's hands and sprinting deeper into the park. The agents pursued them, their footsteps echoing like thunder, relentless in their hunt. As they weaved through the trees, Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't let them catch them. She wouldn't let her children become part of the experiment. "Over there," Ethan pointed to a dense thicket of bushes. "We can hide in there." "Good idea," Sarah replied, urgency lacing her voice as they dove into the cover of the foliage. The thorns scratched at Sarah's arms, but she pressed on, pulling her children close. They huddled together, hearts pounding in sync as they listened to the agents searching for them nearby. "Where are they?" one of the agents called, his voice cold and calculating. "They can't have gone far. Check the perimeter," another barked, the sound of footsteps growing nearer. Tension hung thick in the air, and Sarah could feel her heart racing. They couldn't be caught. She wouldn't let it happen. In that moment, she felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct to protect her children at all costs. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled them closer. The agents moved closer, their silhouettes looming ominously against the faint light filtering through the trees. Sarah's mind raced as she thought of their options. They needed a plan, and fast. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the park entrance, breaking the oppressive silence. The agents turned their heads, momentarily distracted. "What was that?" one asked, his voice tense. "Go check it out," another commanded, urgency lacing his tone. As they moved away, Sarah seized the opportunity. "Now, this is our chance," she hissed, urging her children to follow her deeper into the thicket. They crawled through the underbrush, the thorns scraping against their skin as they pushed forward. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. Finally, they broke free from the thicket and found themselves in a small clearing. The chaos of the park faded behind them, replaced by an unsettling stillness. "Where do we go now?" Ethan asked, glancing nervously at the trees that surrounded them. "We need to find a way to get out of town," Sarah replied, her mind racing. "There has to be a way." Just as she spoke, a low rumble echoed through the clearing, and the ground trembled beneath them. The sky darkened further, and a thick fog rolled in, wrapping around the trees like a shroud. "What's happening?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her heart sinking as she scanned their surroundings. The fog thickened, enveloping them in an otherworldly gloom. As the mist descended, Sarah felt a creeping sensation wash over her. It was as if the fog was alive, breathing, wrapping around them like a predator preparing to pounce. "Mommy, I can't see," Ethan cried, panic rising in his voice. "Stay close. We'll find a way out," Sarah urged, trying to remain calm despite the fear clawing at her insides. But as the fog thickened, the world around them began to change. Shadows twisted and warped, creating grotesque shapes that danced in the mist. The whispers returned, louder than ever, echoing in Sarah's mind. "You're one of us now." "No," she screamed, trying to push the words away, but the fog seemed to seep into her thoughts, filling her mind with dread. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist, cloaked in darkness. It stood before them, its face obscured. Sarah felt her breath hitch as she instinctively shielded her children. "Come with me," the figure said, its voice smooth yet chilling. "You're not meant to be here." "Stay away from us," Sarah shouted, fear gripping her heart. The figure stepped closer, the fog swirling around it. "You can't escape. You belong to us now." "Mommy," Ethan cried, clutching her leg tightly. "Run," Sarah shouted, grabbing her children and sprinting in the opposite direction. They barreled through the fog, disoriented and terrified. The whispers grew louder, echoing around them, clawing at her sanity. She could feel the figure following them, its presence heavy and suffocating. "Where are we going?" Lily asked, her voice small and trembling. "I don't know, just keep running," Sarah replied, her heart racing as she pushed through the fog. Suddenly, they burst into another clearing, and as the fog lifted, Sarah realized they were no longer in the park. They had stumbled into a dilapidated building, its structure crumbling and covered in vines. "Quick, in there," she urged, leading her children inside. The air inside was stale and musty, filled with an unsettling silence. Shadows danced along the walls, and the remnants of a forgotten world surrounded them. "Mommy, I'm scared," Ethan whispered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, sweetie, we just need to catch our breath," Sarah replied, her heart racing as she scanned the area for any sign of danger. But the whispers remained, a constant presence in her mind. "You're one of us now." As they huddled together in the corner, Sarah felt the weight of despair settle over her. The world outside was spiraling into chaos, and they were trapped in this nightmare with no way out. As time stretched on in the darkness of the dilapidated building, Sarah felt a deep sense of hopelessness envelop her. The whispers grew louder, almost mocking her, seeping into her consciousness. "You're one of us now." "Mommy, I don't want to be one of them," Ethan murmured, his small voice filled with fear. "I don't either, honey," Sarah whispered back, squeezing his hand tightly. "We're going to find a way out, I promise." Suddenly, a low rumbling echoed through the building, shaking the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Sarah felt her heart race. They couldn't stay here much longer. "Let's look for a way out," she urged, standing up and glancing around. The building was filled with remnants of what once was a broken chair, a dusty table, and walls that seemed to whisper their own secrets. "Where do we go?" Lily asked, her eyes wide and terrified. "Let's check the back," Sarah replied, leading them cautiously through the debris. The further they ventured inside, the more the air felt heavy, thick with an unnatural energy. In the back room, they discovered a staircase spiraling downward, the steps creaking ominously beneath their weight. "What do you think is down there?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know, but we need to find out," Sarah replied, her heart pounding in her chest. With a deep breath, she led her children down the stairs, the darkness enveloping them. As they reached the bottom, they found themselves in a dimly lit room. Old machinery surrounded them, wires snaking along the walls, flickering lights casting eerie shadows. The air buzzed with electricity, and Sarah's skin prickled with anxiety. "What is this place?" Lily whispered, clutching her mother's side. I think it's some kind of lab," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's where they're conducting the experiments." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from above, causing the ground to shake beneath them. "They're coming," Sarah exclaimed, her heart racing. "We need to hide." They ducked behind a large piece of machinery just as the sound of footsteps echoed through the building. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she listened, straining to hear what was happening. "We have to find them," a voice called, cold and commanding. "They can't escape the experiment." "Search the building, they can't be far," another voice replied, sending chills down Sarah's spine. The weight of their predicament pressed heavily on her chest as fear threatened to suffocate her. "What do we do?" she whispered to herself, panic clawing at her mind. As the footsteps grew closer, Sarah's thoughts raced. She needed to find a way to protect her children, to escape this nightmare before it was too late. She scanned the room, looking for anything that might serve as a weapon or a way out. "Mommy, I'm scared," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. "I know, sweetie, just hold on tight," Sarah replied, her mind racing. Suddenly, her gaze landed on a door at the far end of the room. "There, we can get out that way," she whispered, pointing to the door. "But what if they see us?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with fear. "We'll have to be quick. We can't stay here," Sarah said, determination hardening her resolve. As they made their way toward the door, the whispers grew louder in her mind. "You're one of us now." She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. They couldn't take her. They wouldn't. Just as they reached the door, a loud crash echoed from above, and dust fell from the ceiling, swirling around them like a storm. "Quick, in there," Sarah urged, flinging the door open and leading her children into the next room. They stumbled into a hallway lined with flickering fluorescent lights, and Sarah could feel the oppressive weight of the experiment closing in around them. The whispers had transformed into a cacophony, screaming in her mind, urging her to submit. "Keep moving," she urged, pushing her children forward. But as they turned the corner, they froze in horror. At the end of the hallway stood a group of people, their faces obscured by masks, the same eerie smiles stretching across their lips. "You're too late," one of them said, voice dripping with mockery. "You can't escape what you've become." "Mommy," Ethan cried, clutching her tightly. "Run," Sarah shouted, grabbing her children's hands and bolting in the opposite direction. They raced down the hall, hearts pounding as the masked figures followed close behind, their laughter echoing eerily. "We have to find a way out," Sarah yelled, desperation fueling her steps. They dashed through door after door, the sound of their footsteps pounding against the floor like a war drum. But the labyrinthine building seemed endless, the shadows closing in around them. Finally, they burst into a large room filled with equipment and monitors, the flickering screens casting an unsettling glow. "What is this place?" Lily gasped, her eyes wide. "This is where they're controlling everything," Sarah realized, her heart racing. "We have to shut it down." "But how?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know, but we can't let them keep doing this," Sarah replied, her mind racing as she scanned the room for anything that could help. Suddenly, she spotted a large switch on the wall labeled Control. Without thinking, she dashed toward it, adrenaline propelling her forward. "Stay close," she shouted to her children. As she reached for the switch, the whispers crescendoed, filling her mind with chaos. "You're one of us now." "No," she screamed, gripping the switch tightly. "I won't let you take us." With a swift motion, she pulled the switch down. The lights flickered violently, and a deafening alarm blared throughout the building. "What did you do?" Ethan shouted, panic in his voice. Something, anything to stop this, Sarah yelled, her heart racing as she turned to her children. As the alarms blared, the masked figures surged into the room, their faces twisted in fury. "You'll regret this," one of them shouted, lunging toward them. "Run," Sarah yelled, pulling her children back toward the door. They bolted through the doorway, hearts pounding as they navigated the maze of machinery. The alarms blared like an angry beast, and the building shook as the walls seemed to tremble with fury. "You're one of us now." The words echoed in her mind, a sinister reminder of what they were fighting against. But Sarah refused to surrender. With her children by her side, she charged forward, desperation fueling her every step. "We have to get out, now," she shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. They raced through the building, their footsteps echoing in the chaos. Behind them, the masked figures shouted, the sounds of their pursuit growing closer. Finally, they reached a set of double doors at the end of the hall. There, Sarah pointed, her heart racing with hope. "Mommy, hurry," Ethan cried, tugging at her hand. With a surge of determination, Sarah flung the doors open, and they burst into the outside world. But as they stepped outside, they were met with a sight that stole their breath away. The sky was dark, swirling with ominous clouds, and the streets were filled with chaos. People ran in all directions, their faces twisted with fear. "Sarah," a familiar voice called out, cutting through the chaos. It was Lisa, her face pale and drawn. "Lisa, we need to get out of here," Sarah shouted, pulling her children closer. Lisa looked at her with wide eyes, a mixture of relief and fear. "I thought you were gone, they're everywhere." "We have to stick together," Sarah urged, glancing back at the building. The masked figures were spilling out, their eerie smiles visible even from a distance. "They're coming." "We need to find a safe place," Lisa shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Follow me," Sarah called, leading them through the chaos. As they weaved through the crowd, the whispers grew louder, taunting her, echoing in her mind. "You're one of us now." "No," Sarah screamed, shaking her head violently. She had to resist. She had to fight for her children. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, and Sarah felt a surge of fear. "We need to get to the car," she yelled, spotting their vehicle parked at the edge of the street. They sprinted toward it, dodging panicked townspeople as the sky darkened further, a storm brewing overhead. "Get in," Sarah shouted, shoving her children into the back seat before jumping into the driver's seat. "Mommy, what's happening?" Lily cried, her voice filled with terror. "I don't know, but we're getting out of here," Sarah replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Just as she turned the key in the ignition, the whispers crescendoed, drowning out all other sounds. "You're one of us now." "No," Sarah screamed, slamming her hands against her temples, desperate to block them out. "Mommy," Ethan cried, his voice filled with fear. "Drive, please." With a surge of determination, Sarah forced herself to focus, revving the engine and speeding down the street. The chaos around them blurred into a whirlwind of colors as they raced through the town. "Where do we go?" Lisa shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "Anywhere but here," Sarah yelled, her heart racing. They needed to escape the nightmare that had consumed their lives. As they sped down the road, the world outside seemed to warp, shadows flickering at the edges of her vision. The whispers continued, echoing in her mind, relentless in their pursuit. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the road, waving frantically. Sarah slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt just inches from the person. "Help, you have to help us," the figure shouted, panic in their voice. "Get in," Sarah yelled, throwing the passenger door open. The figure jumped inside, breathless and terrified. "They're everywhere. You have to get us out of here." "Who are you?" Lisa demanded, glancing nervously at the newcomer. "I'm just a survivor," the person said, their eyes wide with fear. "We need to stick together. They're hunting us." "Who's hunting us?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "The government. They're using the vaccine to control us. We have to escape," the survivor explained, their voice trembling. With a nod, Sarah pressed on the gas, speeding away from the chaos that had overtaken their town. But the whispers continued, a haunting melody that echoed in her mind. "You're one of us now." "No," Sarah shouted, shaking her head fiercely. "I won't let you take me." As they drove, the landscape outside began to change. The familiar streets transformed into a twisted version of their reality, shadows creeping along the edges of the road, and the sky darkened further. "Where are we going?" the survivor asked, panic rising in their voice. "Anywhere but here," Sarah shouted, determination fueling her every move. But as they navigated the labyrinth of the town, the whispers grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. "You're one of us now." Just then, they reached the outskirts of town, a dense forest looming before them. "There, we can hide in the woods," Lisa shouted, pointing toward the trees. "Good idea," Sarah replied, veering off the road and speeding toward the cover of the trees. They plunged into the darkness of the forest, the trees closing in around them like a shroud. The whispers became a cacophony, echoing in her mind, filling her with dread. But Sarah refused to give in. She had to protect her children. "Stay close," she urged, guiding her family deeper into the woods. The further they ventured, the darker it became, the air thick with an unsettling energy. Shadows flickered at the corners of her vision, and the whispers turned into a chorus of torment, urging her to surrender. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a small clearing. "We can rest here," Sarah said, her heart pounding. "Mommy, I'm scared," Lily whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know, baby, but we'll be okay," Sarah promised, pulling them close. "We just need to figure out what to do next." As they huddled together, the forest closed in around them, the whispers swirling like a storm. "You're one of us now." In that moment, Sarah knew they were being hunted, the darkness closing in, but she would fight with everything she had to protect her children. As the whispers reached a deafening crescendo, Sarah felt a surge of determination flood her veins. The shadows danced around them, but she wouldn't let them win. "We're not giving in," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "Mommy, what do we do?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide with fear. "We have to make a stand," Sarah replied, her heart pounding. "We'll find a way to fight back." But how? The forest loomed ominously, the shadows closing in like a tidal wave. "We can't let them take us," she whispered, gripping her children tightly. "We have to protect each other." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, its form barely visible through the swirling mist. Sarah's heart raced as she instinctively shielded her children. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice trembling with fear. "Sarah," the figure said, stepping into the faint light. It was Lisa, her face pale and haunted. "What are you doing here?" Sarah demanded, her heart racing. "I came to warn you," Lisa said, her voice urgent. "They're coming for you. You have to leave the woods." "No, we're not going anywhere," Sarah shouted, her mind racing. They couldn't just give up. "We can't fight them," Lisa said, desperation lacing her tone. "You have to trust me." But Sarah shook her head. "I won't let them take my children. I refuse to be a part of this experiment." Just then, the whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind, relentless and taunting. "You're one of us now." "No," Sarah screamed, clutching her head as the shadows closed in. "I won't let you take me." "Sarah, listen to me," Lisa urged, desperation in her voice. "We can help you. We can fight together." But Sarah's heart raced with fear, and the shadows closed in, swirling around them like a storm. "I can't trust you. I don't know who to believe." Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them, and the shadows surged forward, reaching for Sarah and her children. "Run," she yelled, pulling them away from the encroaching darkness. As they sprinted through the forest, Sarah's heart raced. The whispers clawed at her sanity, urging her to surrender. "You're one of us now." "No, I won't give in," she shouted, determination fueling her every step. They raced through the trees, but the forest felt alive, the shadows twisting and turning, creating a labyrinth of darkness. Sarah could feel the weight of despair closing in around her, but she wouldn't let it win. "Mommy, I can't run anymore," Ethan gasped, struggling to keep up. "We have to keep going," Sarah urged, pulling him along. "We're almost there." Suddenly, they burst into another clearing, and as the moonlight broke through the trees, Sarah froze in horror. The masked figures stood before them, their eerie smiles twisting into sinister grins. "You can't escape us," one of them said, their voice dripping with malice. "Get away from us," Sarah shouted, stepping protectively in front of her children. The figures laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down her spine. "You've already lost. You're one of us now," another taunted, their voice echoing in the night. "No, we're not," Sarah shouted, her voice filled with defiance. She could feel the darkness closing in around them, but she wouldn't let it win. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy, and Sarah felt a surge of power coursing through her veins. "I won't let you take my children," she screamed, determination flooding her. With a surge of adrenaline, she charged at the nearest figure, her fists clenched. They laughed, but she felt a primal instinct awaken within her, a fire igniting in her soul. As she collided with the figure, a shockwave rippled through the air, sending them crashing back. The others staggered, surprised by her strength. "Mommy," Ethan cried, watching in awe. "Keep running," Sarah shouted, pushing her children forward as she faced the figures. "We have to get out of here." But the figures advanced, their laughter echoing ominously. "You can't fight us," one sneered, stepping closer. "You're already one of us." "No," Sarah screamed, pushing back against the darkness. She could feel the whispers clawing at her mind, but she wouldn't let them win. As the figures closed in, Sarah drew on every ounce of strength she had left. She wouldn't give in, not now, not ever. "Mommy, please," Ethan cried, tears streaming down his face. "Stay strong, my loves," Sarah shouted, her heart racing. "We're getting out of this together." With a fierce cry, she lunged forward, her fists flying as she fought against the encroaching darkness. The figures recoiled, surprised by her ferocity. As she battled, she felt the shadows receding, the whispers fading into the night. "You don't own us," she screamed, her voice echoing through the clearing. In that moment, the figures hesitated, uncertainty flickering across their masked faces. Sarah seized the opportunity, grabbing her children's hands and pulling them away from the darkness. "Run, now," she shouted, her heart racing as they sprinted toward the edge of the clearing. As they dashed through the trees, the whispers faded, replaced by the sound of their heartbeat in her ears. They were free. But as they emerged from the forest, Sarah felt a sense of unease settle over her. The sky was dark, swirling with ominous clouds, and the town lay before them in ruins. "Where do we go now?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Anywhere but here," Sarah replied, determination igniting within her. They had to find a safe place, a way to escape the nightmare that had consumed their lives. But as they moved through the remnants of their town, shadows lurked at the edges of her vision, and the whispers threatened to return. "You're one of us now." "No," Sarah shouted, shaking her head violently. She wouldn't let them take her children. Suddenly, she spotted a group of survivors huddled together, their faces filled with fear and determination. "Help! We need help!" Sarah called, running toward them. As they approached, the survivors looked up, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and despair. "What happened?" one asked, concern etched on their face. "We were trapped in the lab," Sarah explained, her heart racing. "They're experimenting on people. We have to fight back." The survivors nodded, their resolve strengthening. "We've been trying to find a way to stop them," one of them said, "but we need more people." "Then let's gather everyone we can," Sarah urged, determination igniting within her. "We have to take a stand." As they spread the word, Sarah felt a sense of purpose wash over her. They would fight back against the darkness that threatened to consume them. Together, they could make a difference. But the shadows still lurked at the edges of her vision, the whispers threatening to return. "You're one of us now." "No," Sarah shouted, shaking her head. "We're not giving in. We're fighting for our lives." As the survivors rallied together, a plan began to form. They would take back their town, their lives, and their freedom. As night fell, the air crackled with energy, and Sarah stood with her children by her side, ready to face the darkness. "We won't let them take us," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. In that moment, the whispers faded, replaced by the sound of their heartbeat in her ears. They were no longer alone. They were a force to be reckoned with. And as they charged forward, ready to fight back, Sarah knew that they would prevail. Together, they would rise against the darkness. Together, they would reclaim their lives. And together, they would never be one of them.